Gather round, my children, and listen. For today we are returning once again to the world of Berserk. Conviction arc. Last we left off, before the break began, Berserk had seen Guts arriving at the refugee camp and engaging in fierce combat with the Zealots. Now Casca's future is unsure as she has been taken in by the heretics. What comes next? We shall see. I actually know up into pretty far into this because we're covering most of 7 and I read most of 7 in preparation. And a lot of you have already read the story from what I understand. So it's going to be a little bit of like, a lot of us know, but I'm sure some don't, and that's wonderful. Without any further ado, let's jump back into Berserk. Because we're doing Conviction arc, I wanted to dress up like a cult leader, and for some reason my impression is they always wear like very beigey light colors. So this is Cult Leader Daniel.
No one would follow you.
Shut up. Shut up. Jumping on into it. So we actually left off in the middle of combat, and we see this combat continues as Guts, of course, easily brutalizes several of the Zealots working for the Master, and they end up retreating after he cuts 4 men and their horses in twine. And what I want to say though is, Guts, please stop killing horses, my guy. I like horses. One thing I do like about this sequence, though, is as Guts is brutalizing we people, we see Isidoro looking at him going, woo! I imagine he's not going, whoa, which is what the comic is trying to communicate. It's W-O-O-O-O, so I imagine he's just going, woo! Luca approaches Guts after all of this is over, though, and pretty much tells him, like, hey, you're looking for someone with a brand like yours, and Guts takes it to a 10 and grabs her and is like, where's Casca? And we see they're being watched by something, and this something watching them is probably my least favorite section as of now of this segment of Berserk, but we'll get into that much later on. They head on over to the tent where Elaine and Nina are hiding, but Nina has taken Casca, Elaine, and run off to try and escape the guards she believes are coming for her, as well as the heretics, because of, you know, the whole debauchery that happened. And I thought I had to block out a lot of nudity last time. Oh my god, this one gets so much worse. But seeing there hasn't really been a struggle, Luca and Guts aren't really sure what could have happened to Nina and Casca, so they split up to try and look for them, and Isidoro actually finds them. He sees them being taken by a group of the heretics and decides to follow, Puck tagging along with him. We see during this time, though, that one of the heretics is betraying his group and has come to Lady Fernice to tell her, like, oh my god, what's going on? So she starts gathering forces to go to their hideout, as well as Casca is being taken there, as well as Isidoro following. And when Isidoro gets there, he sees the heretics are trying to cut open Nina's heart, remove it, and then give it to Casca as a sacrifice for the witch who displayed all those powers. So that. And I hate to see it, but like Spielberg before him, Mura actually gets me to like Isidoro, which is a kid character, which I don't normally like, because Isidoro's like, Puck, go get Guts, I'm gonna try and delay this shit. And he starts picking up stones and like bullseye, just pinging eyeballs left and right. He talks about how he's been like surviving on his own, and that's given him like a set of skills like this, but what were you doing the whole time you were surviving? Pinging birds out of the sky with rocks? Dude, I didn't know Bullseye was gonna make an appearance, but we're getting his origin story, apparently. There's also the gargantuan goat demon, which I almost just called a devil because Chainsaw Man, walking around during all of this. And I was looking at this during this section thinking like, oh my god, I just appreciate the creature design of Berserk so much. I hadn't seen nothing yet. But we see, due to all the stress Casca's under with this, more of her powers begin activating, and that miasma of smoke begins having faces in it. It infects the cultists and starts turning them into maybe the easiest nightmare fuel for any creator to make for me, and that's to do a monster that's near human, right? There's just like a little bit off about them, and that kind of puts it in that uncanny valley, like something's upsetting looking at them kind of territory, and Berserk utilizes that here exceptionally well, not only in the design, but the way it influences the story as well. Because just as they start turning into these monsters, that is when the knights, led by Lady Fernice, arrive, and a battle erupts, and the amount of cock I'm going to have to censor for this section. If you want the uncensored version for some breastises and Panacea, it's on Patreon. To his massive credit, Isidoro does not freak out. He actually stays on top of it, and when he sees Nina and Casca threatened, he leaps down and helps them escape, one of them saying, hey, I spotted a back exit. It's where that goat demon and the priest that's with him are running to. Let's follow them with their little emergency escape route. They start running up, something hits the goat demon, and then all of a sudden they start running back like, no, because the goat demon has turned around. It jumps into combat looking more animalistic than before, I believe, and just starts butchering a whole bunch of the knights that had come. And at this point, we see outside the cave, there's a figure all in black that blurs by. Wonder who that could be, because Casca is being picked up by the goat devil demon thing, and of course held in a she's being molested by a penis snake thing. God damn it, Berserk. Guts crashes on in and attacks the goat devil demon. Fuck! Damn it, Chainsaw Man. A whole bunch more badass action happens, with Gus pledging to take Casca with him this time. And I think he means that not just like in the I'm getting her out of this case scenario, I think he's meaning that in like a I'm not leaving her side again kind of context. Growth! Lady Fernice is pulled out by her men though, as they're saying it's too dangerous to have their leader, and at this point, Casca and everyone else, after Guts does successfully kill the goat demon, flee out through that back exit that is now open. They went while Guts was still in combat though, so he has to leave after them to try and catch up, but when he goes down this back alley path, which is just a cliff, and it's quite important. This cliff is utilized a lot. In fact, this chapter I think is even called just The Cliff. He runs into our little dueling boy again, the man who almost got a draw with Guts in a quick draw competition, but I still deem Guts the winner because he got a cut in the face. He ruined the other guy's sneakers, and like, that's more of an inconvenience. The guy had to walk barefoot home. Guts victory. Barefoot home. We see further on down the path, though, Nina, Isidoro, and Casca are trying to utilize a rope that's there to lower themselves down from this cliff. With Casca being in the condition she's in, she can't exactly do it very well, so they start just tying her up and lowering her that way after Nina's already been let down. The dueling guy, though, has brilliantly utilized this cliff, knowing that Guts' good arm is against the wall, his massive sword won't be much use, and his heavy armor on this dense ledge means he's at a severe disadvantage, while this fencer is able to pretty much just operate how fencers want to operate on a straight line. Guts uses his armored hand like to try and stop all these cuts from being more than just minor cuts, and he finally succeeds when he grabs the sword and just punches it to break it. Our little fencer man, whose name eludes me for some reason, does like a trick around Guts, which allows Guts to continue on down to meet up with his crew, but actually all he ends up seeing is that Lady Fernice's forces ran into the crew that were lowering themselves and took them all prisoner, except for Isidoro. I might be saying his name wrong, but you know, that'll make people correct me in the comments. Engagement! That's why I don't correct myself too much. And here's where I know it's been too long since I read Berserk, because I was thinking, okay, here's the next beat of this story. Guts is going to go back to the camp. He's going to talk to everybody, rally these people who have been so oppressed by this religious zealot, and he's going to bring an army to siege the camp. No, he's not. That's not Berserk. That would have been totally out of left field and not in Guts' character at all. And instead, he just starts marching on the castle on his own with Luca and Isidoro, and that's the force that's going to siege the castle. And I was like, that doesn't seem very fair for the defenders.
Call an ambulance, but not for me.
Luca tells her people that if they're not back by dawn, just flee this refugee camp. There's no point in being here anymore. And they manage to get to the castle, and she goes to like a secret entrance she often uses apparently to get in and out, and bribes someone to let her and Guts in. But of course that person doesn't see Guts. Guts manages to sneak by in his tremendous armor. Not sure about that, but he's about to have some crazy stealth feats, so let's just not question it, I guess. And we see one more image of this weird creature design that's viewing and just spectating what's happening. Again, not my favorite part of this. We cut to Nina and Casca in a prison cell, though, and here is actually some really nice character beats taken with Nina, because the torturers arrive and they want to take one of them, and at first they grab Casca, and Nina is really internally conflicted, like, Casca can't defend herself. Should I let her go? Like, no, I should offer myself, but oh my god, I don't want to go with these torturers. And you sympathize with that. Anyone in this situation would know, like, I should volunteer myself, but how many of you would honestly honestly be able to volunteer yourself for horrific torture in someone else's place. It makes you kind of resent Nina, because of course we love Casca and we want to see Casca saved, but it's also a really human thing to like hesitate. But the fact that she hesitated means the torturer turns to her and goes, actually you, because you are about to let your friend who can't even speak go. You're terrible. We're torturing you. And I'm like, torturer, you suck. You're kind of like, your oversimplified morals are actually a reflection of how Nina's conflict is very understandable, but of course this person who's just a zealot isn't going to see the nuance and be able to empathize and put themselves in their shoes, and therefore judge this person. And I do judge Nina along with him, but not as harshly, and that's part of the great like moral play that goes on in Berserk, where there's these little situations that shine so well with characterization, and it's the reason this series sticks in my head so well. This actually might be my favorite moral conundrum from Berserk yet, because the more I've thought about it, the more it's so clearly the author utilizing your predisposition to dislike this character to, of course, make you quickly harshly judge her on a side for Casca, because yeah, we don't want to see Casca hurt anymore, absolutely. But then the torturer comes in and does an even harsher version of that judgment, which forces you to realize that you're playing into the same logic he is of forgetting the humanity of the person he's about to torture. You're forgetting Nina's right to self-preservation to hesitate in a situation like this. Yeah, she's not behaving in the best way, but who of us really would? And that's so well set up and executed here, and it's why Berserk's characterization tying into narrative is just so consistently top tier. We see that Lady Farnese actually starts slapping the crap out of her right-hand sword man. At this point, I don't know why I don't know his name. Serpico! I looked it up, but I don't think I'm saying it right, but I'm gonna call him Serpico, because I like that. But she's getting in his face and slapping him and being like, remember, you serve me. And they happen to be walking by Nina, who's being taken from the torture chamber. And that's because apparently she just confessed everything before they could even start torturing her, and I do not blame her. It's one of those things where there's gonna be a lot of people in the comment section who are like, I wouldn't have turned anyone in. Yeah, you would've. That's the arrogance of man. We all think we could stand up to torture for the people we love, but could you? Do most of you stub your toe and that takes you down to the ground for 5 minutes? We see Lady Farnese joins Mazgas in the torture chamber though, and they start going over the report of what exactly happened at the Heretic's Cave, and she says it had to have been some kind of mass hallucination because what she saw couldn't have been there, and then they observed that Casca was going to be used as some kind of witch ritual sacrifice. This makes Mazgas grab Casca and want to put her in one of those like iron coffin things, which apparently those were actually never really used. Mainly because if you think about it, if you put someone in there and close it, that wouldn't be a torture device. That's just killing someone. But they put Casca in there and start closing it. And Puck is trying to get to the torture chamber as quickly as they can, separated from Guts. I'm not entirely sure how that actually wasn't made super clear. But he breaks into the room right as Casca's blood starts to get drawn. And then once again, her supernatural, uncontrollable powers just erupt from her to protect her from whatever danger is about to come. And we see this black wave of face-filled goo, oh my god, start just flooding the torture chamber. And of course, the religious zealots are like, devil. They all start just fleeing the torture chamber, and Mazgas and his torturers are separated from Lady Farnese and her crew. Puck is caught up in this as well, and the last we see is him coming face to face with Casca being completely absorbed within this miasma of disgust. We cut to Guts, who's apparently nearby and watching Lady Farnese be taken by her people, and he somehow, while she's in the middle of her party of people, just yoink her from there, take her down the hall, and question her with a knife. Here are the panels. I don't know how he did that. Guts has never been like the stealthiest guy, and he's wearing heavy iron armor, so alright. It just reminds me of like Splinter Cell, when there'd be like a fairly well-lit room and you have like lights on your back and you manage to like come up and just grab someone without someone else who's right next to them seeing it. But after threatening Lady Farnese, she agrees to take him back to where Casca is. We see Nina in her cell is seeing that wave of death come towards her, and she's then let out by Jerome, the guy who was hooking up with Luca back then, and apparently he's being set up to be an actually good guy. And at this point, I was like, he is going to die. He's a good guy. He's being nice, and he's putting himself in harm's way, and this is Berserk. Jerome gonna die. Calling it now. He's having some conflict about straight up abandoning his duty for these people, but when Isidro points out that he's already an accomplice, he's like, all right, and just kind of goes along with his total betrayal of his people. We watch as Guts with Lady Fernice burst into the torture chamber, and all that's left from the bodies of people who are being tortured is just skeletons. They've been stripped down. Guts picks up a helmet and starts talking to Puck about what happened, and we see Lady Fernice for the first time actually sees Puck, I guess representing some shifting in her worldview because of what was said before when it was originally established she couldn't see Puck. But from here we see Mazgus, which is how I'm going to say his name because I think it's awesome, is trapped in a room with his torturers, and the door is being hammered down by this wave of death that has followed them. And he's preaching, "Now is the time for our faith to be tested. Our mouths shall not call out for God to save us. Faith demands our all. I devote myself gladly to this trial. Repent ye dead. It is through death that we espy faith. Come at me!" And he has this face, best face in Berserk yet. Coming down from the ceiling is actually that observer we saw from before. They're descending down with little spindly world tentacle arms. And what happens next here, again, I'm not entirely sure about, but I'll walk it through carefully. We cut back to Casca and her crew fleeing after seeing Mazgus somewhat interfered with by this thing that's descending. They're surrounded on both sides by this wave of death, and just as it looks like they're about to be completely overtaken, Isidoro takes one of the explosives and throws it, and it emits a far bigger explosion than I thought it ever did before, and it blows open a door that allows them to enter a space, and then they're in the same room with Mazgus, and Mazgus is saying, "I have witnessed a miracle," because the fire, I think, saved them all. I just wasn't entirely sure spatially why they're right next to each other or how they fled there. Okay, I reread this sequence and it makes a lot more sense now. No, it is not Isidoro throwing a little bomb and clearing out a room to they then enter and run into Mazgus and his people, and instead, it's Mazgus and his people actually advancing through the monsters that were attacking him, and it's Mazgus who's creating this giant attack, I assume, that they all jumped out of the way of to survive, and the way he gets to Casca is by coming through this smoke and picking her up, so it makes a lot more sense than I thought. Though, spatially, I wish we had been set up a little bit better for this castle than we're currently getting with just a spiraling up staircase where they're seeming to be pushed back down to a platform. But now we see Mazgus apparently believes this is what the Lord intends, to use this power to guide the people. And there's a little bit of a showdown where they're like, "You're the witch's friends, you're evil," and Isidoro's like, "You think we're the sketchy? Look at yourself, guy." And I think Isidoro's got a great point. But Jerome is like, "I gotta take on these torturers now," and just immediately it's clear that that is not an option. One of the torturers attacks and ends up sending Luca like out of a hole in the wall, and she falls. And we see Skelly Boy is riding up the side of this castle and actually saves her as she's falling, but we'll cut back to that. We cut to Guts and we see that Puck is directly leading him to whatever this presence he feels that's so awful. And just as the torturers are about to just wipe out the remainder of the Jerome, Luca, Nina, well, not Luca anymore, party, Guts bursts in, and the fight between Guts and the torturers begins. Instead of focusing on that, though, we cut to Luca after she's caught by Skelly Boy, and he has taken her down to the field of bodies surrounding this fortress, and holy crap, she thinks she's dead, of course. I mean, last thing she remembers, she's falling from a building, and she's caught by a skeleton on a horse here to be like, "Oh, death. I'm in Discworld." But no, Death lets her know quite handily that you're not actually dead. These are just the bodies around here. And as they're conversing, the skeleton is like, "There is something here, a remnant." But before we can see what it is in the shadow, the little observer who's been fiddling around with this whole storyline, we cut back to Guts fighting the torturers. And Mazgus says, "So you are the infamous Black Swordsman. I do not know your reasons, but I shall by no means relinquish this witch in the name of God's righteousness." And like, my guy, shut the hell up. Like, I've been waiting for Guts to say it, so I'll go ahead and say it. Shut the hell up. "You fool who rebels against God, you shall pay for this sin with your blood." And Guts is thinking, apostles? No, they're not. Looks like they're pseudos. But this feeling in my neck, there'll be plenty of trouble. And there's 7 of them. From monsters in the cellar to angels in the tower. I'm fed up with this farce. And it is a farce. Also, Guts, I did not know you knew the word farce. Love the vocab today. And we see Isidoro tries to get involved in this fight, and Jerome's just like, absolutely not. Like, ooh, this is out of our league, son. We get a ton of action back and forth between Guts and these guys. As he's successfully managing to land blows and stuff, these guys start looking more and more monstrous. And the creature design, I'm sounding like a broken record, but please just go along with me because it's one of my favorite parts of fantasy when I get to see monsters that I would just love to see in live action. And man, oh man, if Berserk already wasn't the best monsters I have ever seen in fantasy, this section claims the spot. They are so human, yet inhuman, monstrous, vile, while looking like something that could absolutely just exist and be in your nightmares. And they still maintain that religious zealot torture or angle to them the worse and worse they look. I adore this, and the angel wings that they all get just adds to the vibe. But we cut back to the skeleton and Luca, and we hear Luca's internal thoughts as she says, "What's happening before my eyes? Death and some strange monster in a field of corpses. It's like I've strayed into someone's bad dream. It's not terrifying so much as surreal." Disagree, but you're right, it's surreal. Not mutually exclusive. No, if I'm gonna say that, then those monsters in the tower and Mosgos and his are the same, even Elaine. What the hell is happening here on holy ground? This indescribable malaise. It's like the world has begun to crack, starting here. Surprise, actually hasn't started here. It's been going on. You just weren't in. It's understandable. Mistake. I make a lot of mistakes when doing these, but now I get to catch you in one. Started a while ago. And believe it or not, on a scale of like 0 to peak Berserk, this is only like a 7. But we hear a scraggly little voice, I'm assuming is the font chosen, saying from the darkness, "This is my garden. Living humans can leave." And I believe it sends some kind of attack at Skeleton, who slices off a bunch of the stingers we saw puncture the goat demon before. But it does snatch Luca. And we see she wakes up in an altar of skinned people, and she says, "What is this place?" Luca, real quick, correct response to waking up in front of a pillar of skinned corpses isn't "what is this place?" It's the proper response is just thought I'd let you know. But her question is answered. "A deific image, an idol made of the skin and bones of priests. It's not like those made of stone. True power dwells within." She shouts, "Who are you?" "I'm nobody, never having been anyone, known by none, buried in oblivion. My earliest memory is of being in the trash dump at the base of that tower. Since I could first remember, I would hunt for refuse within the maggots and rats, without even knowing who I was. No one ever told me. The black shadow towering into the dull sky, piercing cold and hunger. That's all there was. I first knew of myself when, as if driven by something, I went to spy on the humans above." We see a bunch of people accusing him of being a monster, which... correct. "I ran back down where I belonged. Then I dug a small hole. I came to fish through garbage at night, and by day I sit still in the hole, hardly daring to breathe. And so a long, long time passed. The shadow towered, firmly unchanging. My hole grew deeper so I could escape from it. Deeper, unknown to anyone. Deeper. One day, a strange thing fell down my hole. A corpse, the first human corpse I'd ever seen. I was unable to move, as if frozen to that spot. And then another, one after another, came down. At some point, my dwelling was changed into the grave hole for the people who'd started settling around here. I was buried, crushed by corpses at the bottom of the hole, and no one knew about it. But as I was starting to lose consciousness, I met them at the bottom of the hole. The 5 angels. angels. Dun dun dun! The angels showed me the world. Suddenly I perceived myself and everything surrounding me. All things became words possessing form and meaning. I comprehend the intense things filling me were anger, sadness, and fear. Also, that the world I'd learned of was filled with despair, and that I was nobody, buried and fading away in the deep. I cried out, a cry like both a baby's first and a dying man's last, in a voiceless voice, and the angels answered me. They said, in exchange for something, we will grant your wish. For something? Wish? Luca asks. Yes, the something is this world that surrounds me. And the wish is to hatch the perfect world. And we see this creature's form now, and it is a gargantuan egg with legs, but it's not just any egg. It's a behelit with legs and spindly bits. This shouldn't work, but it does. Yes, I am an egg. The egg of the perfect world. I crawled out of my hole and closely observed the newly arrived humans, and the ones I glimpsed there would fall down dead, absurdly and indiscriminately. Then the suffering and fear of the living trying to escape that death. The deceit-filled system established to conceal that chaos. The people caught between the order, the crooked system, and death. The bizarre festival where with their own hands they gave shape to the shapeless fear they wished to escape. Both the hunters and the hunted, every one of the threatened, was enthralled by heat. The world was ugly. My garden was buried by the debris of that ugly world. Luca interjects, what the hell do you mean to do, this grudge? Are you going to take revenge on the people in Albion? One time, I caught sight of a certain girl. The girl lived by selling her body to men. She was possessed by disease, near to death, and about to be crushed at any time by a world full of fear. But that girl had something to rely on. The leader of her group gathered girls together and lived heartily through the harsh days. The girl clung to her. She took refuge with her like a torch in the night. But the torch didn't just cover the girl in warmth. It threw light upon an inflamed wound hidden by the dark. But those threatened by the dark can by no means ever let go of the torch. All they can do is stare in blank surprise at their illuminated, disgustingly cruel selves, and continue to suffer it. And to protect their stunted self-esteem, they depend on it, all while hating it, cravenly, deceitfully. I, too, while harboring this world that only buried and crushed me, cannot escape from that light. When it comes to those humans, mad with fear, swarming like bugs beneath the tower, nothing will ever change. The ugly, the craven, the deceitful, the threatened, they who cling as they hate, there is but one thing we truly desire. It is the first and last piece, decisively missing from this world, namely... And then we cut back to Guts. But as Guts' fight is wrapping up with the torturers, we see Lady Furnice is, I think, having somewhat of an epiphany as she sees Father Mozgos is just in this horrific form now. She observes, Father Mozgos, what is that form, that man? When the black swordsman appears, it breaks. The world I recognize comes crashing down in ruins. He's dreadful. But she's also, I definitely think, recognizing the problem with her side currently. That child threatened by the night has her imaginary cloak of faith burned away and is illuminated. We see the remaining torturers tell Father Mazgas to get out of here and let them handle Guts, which, good luck. Isidoro sneaks up behind Father Mazgas and tries to land a stone on his head, but unfortunately that doesn't go too well for him and does no damage, and when Father Mazgas takes off with Casca, he's along for the ride. We cut back to Luca one last time though, where the creature continues, "It's the truth. You two have already seen several of what humans would call monsters. No, miracles. To be sure, there were those among them I was involved with, but all I do was grant them the power they desired. Here on holy ground, everything is starting to flow towards that time. I'm doing nothing more than nudging it slightly. You yourself guided that witch to this place, didn't you? Perhaps without knowing it. As you humans would put it, it's the guidance of a greater will, or possibly the gears of fate. All are omens pointing to that time. Soon it will appear in exchange for such a for something that never even existed in this world. My existence." To which Luca asks, "Why'd you bring me here? Why'd you make me listen to all of that?" And just then, Skeleton appears from above and swings down on the creature. It manages to dodge and says from the shadows, "It doesn't matter who. Just so, before I disappear, someone hears my story." And that's my problem with it a wee little bit there. Cool section, like the character, neat. The biggest, most blatant exposition dump of just this creature being the reason I told you was because someone needed to hear my story, not because the reader needed an explanation. I'm running late. I'm gonna bounce now. So peace. See ya. Bye. It's not the most egregious, and I'll just categorize it as characterization. But you gotta admit, the reason that characterization exists is so we could get that exposition. And we see the skeleton says he actually may have hesitated a bit with that swing, and that's why he didn't kill it, which is an interesting thing that Guts has said about himself at various points. So reflection there. And as Luca's thanking the Skeleton King, which I just noticed has a really cool symbol on his shield, he says, "It's too soon for thanks," and turns to see a gargantuan black void with, I think, 2 eyes forming. And here Guts finally takes down the last of the torturers, taking down, I think, one of the longest sections of violence Berserk has ever had. And it ends with yet another kind of quick draw moment where someone manages to get something around Guts' neck, but he slits their throat just as they do. My cat just got in the chair behind me, and then Guts is able to take that thing off of his throat. But if it had been a split second more, those spikes would have been driven into his throat. And we see the building around them begins to shake, and I think it's Lady Fernice shouts, "Earthquake!" And that's the end of martyrdom. And where we will be ending it today. This is already over an hour of raw footage, and I got a late start today, so I need to start editing this boy down. But next time we will be finishing Book 7, and I'm quite excited to do so. Welcome back to Berserk, everybody. If you want to see me do other mangas, I'm already doing Chainsaw Man and Vinland Saga. It's becoming a really big staple of the channel, and I don't mind at all. I'm really enjoying doing these manga read-alongs, and they brought a new angle of enjoyment to what I do, and I genuinely love it. They're the hardest videos I've ever had to make in a day, but it's worth it to me. Love y'all. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. But the uncensored version, it's on Patreon. And have a good one, y'all.